Alas, it was too true. The fatal hand had grappled with the mystery of life. It was the sole bond by which an angelic spirit kept itself in union with a mortal frame. As the last crimson tint of the birthmark, that had the sole token of human imperfection, faded from her cheek, the parting breath of a now perfect woman passed into the atmosphere, and her soul, lingering a moment near her husband, took its heavenward flight. Then a hoarse, chuckling laugh was heard again. Thus ever does the gross fatality of earth exult in its invariable triumph over the immortal essence which this dim half-sphere of half-development demands completeness of higher state. Yet had Alamer reached a profound wisdom, he need not thus have flung away the happiness which would have woven his mortal life from the self-same texture with the celestial. The momentary circumstance was too strong for him. He failed to look beyond the shadowy scope of time, and living once all in eternity, to find the perfect future in the present. Hi, my name's Charlie Robertson. If you're wondering what story I was reading The Birthmark by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Who's that, you may be wondering? Well, Nathaniel Hawthorne was a Gothic and Romance writer back in the 1800s. Well, the 1900s. He wrote some pretty popular writings like The Scarlet Letter, The Birthmark, and The Marble Fawn. Two of those being romances, one of them being one of his Gothic romances. The only one that you should know out of that would be The Scarlet Letter. Nathaniel Hawthorne, in my opinion, doesn't get as much recognition as he should. He's one of the lesser known during his time, and gradually over time, more and more of his works are coming into light. Or trying to. It also has a lot to do with how his works are taught nowadays, especially in school. They're more often than not just excerpts of his full work instead of just the full thing, and just choosing bits and pieces for the students to read if they wanted to. Like in my school, we have no teachings of Hawthorne whatsoever. My first exposure to him was my freshman year. We were in theater class, and we had vignettes during one of our productions called The Night of the Macabre, and one of the vignettes was The Birthmark. And I fell in love with his writing, and I fell down a Hawthorne rabbit hole. I can tell you more about him, like his backstory, his shortcomings, why we remember him in history, and how I think he should be taught, and how we can teach his writings more. His backstory: he was born July 4th in 1804 in Salem, Massachusetts. His family, the Hawthornes, lived in Salem since the 17th century, a descendant of the Puritan judges William Hawthorne and John Hawthorne, a judge who oversaw the Salem witch trials. I thought that was cool because I thought it related to why he wrote like that, but it doesn't, and you'll see why later on. Hawthorne chose to add the W to his name when he was in his earliest 20s because he thought it sounded better than Hawthorne. He liked Hawthorne better. And Hawthorne grew up with his mothers and uncles in Salem and Raymond and Maine. His father was a ship captain who died of yellow fever in 1808. Hawthorne was just 4 years old. That's when you start gaining memories and retaining them, and so that memory really stuck with him and it impacted him. Hawthorne suffered temporary paralysis during his youth and studied literature at home with his lexicographer, which is like a person who taught you how to read and write and understand literature works back then. The one that he had was Joseph Emerson Worcester. Hawthorne then later on attended Bowdoin College from 1821 to 1825, where he wrote his early poems and a novel. One of his classmates was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, and they developed a friendship later in life. Hawthorne moved back to Salem after graduation. He might be best known for his novels, letters, and short stories, but he also wrote a few poems. The best known out of the few that he wrote would be The Ocean, which he published in the Salem Gazette after he graduated, so in 1825. He's most famous for four of his romances, some of his short stories, and some of his Gothic literatures. He was recognized by one of his friends and co-writers, Herman Melville. Me and a lot of other people say that he's remembered in history for the Scarlet Letter, because it is considered what made him the one of famous writers. He practically, in my opinion, changed virtues of charity, patience, and sympathy that may have existed in his Puritan society but were not recorded. Hawthorne himself often referred to an allegorical genre as counterfeiting. In any case, he generally contains himself with a very slight embroidery outward of manners, the fairest possible counterfeit of real life, and endeavors to create interest by some less obvious peculiarity of the subject. That was according to Hawthorne himself. He was also recognized by Gothic author Edgar Allan Poe as a wonderful, incredible writer. He was also criticized, Poe also criticized him for his allegorical and mystic traits. Others also argue that he remained remembered for his psychological exploration and his moral complexities and human natures. His settings reflect early patriotism, as well as his contributions to the Romance period. So I felt he was more remembered for his first push into the Romance category. The technical definition of a shortcoming, because I wasn't quite sure what it was, is a fault or failure to meet standards typically in a person's character, plans, or systems. And according to recent writers, in this fast-paced time, most are eager to show his political views. They say he was a Democrat, but according to them, Hawthorne disliked snobbery and commercial appetites. He wanted to be proud of America, and his very fascination with the dead past occasionally tempted him into an uneasy expression of sympathy for the present and the hope for the future. Yet few Americans have been so congenially conservative as Hawthorne, steeped in a tradition and suspicious of alteration. That was according to the Moral Conservatism of Hawthorne, or the MCOH. I don't think this is necessarily a shortcoming, but he was a really, really big conservative. And they say Hawthorne was a personification of a conservative without all the racist and sexist remarks and stuff that they make today, that a modern day conservative has. They also say that the survival of conservative spirit depends on the resurgence of a dead generations, the incessant movement and alteration of life in America, the absence of true family continuity, and even the perishable fabric of life in America, of building America to unite in tempting the United States to ignore the past, persuading Americans to look backward to their ancestors was still greater. Like Irving, Cooper, and Hawthorne, with historians like Parkman, succeeded in waking the American imagination. They created out of rude and fragmentary materials a vision of American heritage which still helps to direct amorphous mass of American people. That was from the MCOH as well. Hawthorne himself felt that the Scarlet Letter was one of his shortcomings, while others say it was his greatest work. Another shortcoming was his antipathy, to Salem. Rita Gollin says other personal issues that interest students include Hawthorne's relationship to the Manning's mercantile values, his antipathy to Salem, his experiences at Bowdoin College, including his non-confirmatory, and his friendships with Bridge, Pierce, and Longfellow, his lifelong strivings to develop his talent and support himself by his pen during his self-defined 20 lone years, during his political appointments, and so forth. His secret engagement and his identity was a doting but fallible husband and father. That was according to Gollin from the from the Georgetown Library. So in reality, it wasn't just his writings and his beliefs he had shortcomings in, but it was his personal life and his experiences. And a lot of people tend to overlook it. I almost did until I did more research about it. How we should remember or teach him. His name sort of makes people think of either an old Gothic romance writer or a literal hawthorn bush, which is like an old thorny bush that you can either see in America or some European countries. Hawthorne's writings are taught less and less each year, and sometimes none at all, depending on what school you go to. Like mine, I previously stated, we have none. So if we adopt sort of like a pop culture style to teach them, it might excite students more about Hawthorne's works. That would bring up this then, what theoretical examples could coincide with today's pop culture society? Those main categories are like music, movies, and TV shows. Tie those to Hawthorne's works, and boom, you can teach students about Hawthorne. Another method is to compare texts, movies, and song lyrics, and also TV shows that kids watch today and people watch. Looking for mixed metaphors, intertextual links, and the great Gothic romance writer, and references that are obvious. So with these teaching examples, we can remember him as the great Gothic romance writer that he was and still is today. We really need more of his work out there in school, and other than the Scarlet Letter. It's one of his most basic but best writings. So let's try to change that for his sake. Okay, have a great day. This was the book I found. It's Scarlet Letter and Other Writings by Leland S. Pearson. Then I will attach a slide with my online links.